Hi, my name is Cindy Rang with the Fabric Patch in Ephrata, Washington, and today we are doing block number 11 of our Jaye's Bouquet block of the month. Okay, if you're just joining us, we have been working through this 12 block of the month. It's actually 24 blocks. Half of them are hand embroidered and half of them are pieced. So when we first started out, we were doing 5 and 6 stitches just to kind of get us going. And now we found that most of them we've already done. So we might just be showing 1 or 2 per block. So we are all the way down on block number 11, which is this anemone block. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a really quick close-up of this block for you. All right, so we have our nice little close-up of the block number 11. This is our pieced block number 11. We're gonna spend a little bit more time on this and notice there's a fun little bit of fly stitch on that block. And then this is our hand embroidered block. And again, much like some of the others, now that we're near the end of our block of the month, there's 8 stitches on this embroidered block, and really all of them we've talked about before, but there is kind of a fun little this stitch, which is really just putting 2 stitches we've done together. So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate this anyway. This stitch right here, I absolutely love it. I think it's just so fun. She's calling this the symmetrical maidenhair stitch. So I'm going to demonstrate that one for you in just a few minutes, but let's go ahead and review the others. So the chain stitch, of course, we have right here along our outside perimeter, and then we also have it just inside in the edge here. There's a little bit of the chain stitch in the inside circle. We also have a blanket stitch that's very, very close together. We've done this already. I think we did this in block number 5. So it kind of looks like a satin stitch, but really it's just and you could do a satin stitch there if you'd rather, but it's just a really, really close blanket stitch, which is super beautiful. The stem stitch, we've done that every single block since block number 1, and that is just our very thick outline here that you can see all along our stem and the outside edge of our leaves. The fly stitch is up here. We've been doing the fly stitch, I think, since block number 1 or block number 2, and that's up here. And then very closely related to the feather stitch, which has been on most of our veins, which is kind of nice, our leaf veins. And then the bullion stitch is up here. We did that on block number 4, I think. Yep, I'm looking up. Oh, also on block number 2. So we've done the bullion stitch a couple of times, lots of wraps, kind of a fun little thing to do. It's particularly beautiful if you decide you want to do that with some variegation, but kind of stayed kind of close to her colors on this one. So it's these nice little stitches right here. And then of course, right next to the bullions are these gorgeous little French knots. All right, so this is block number 11, our beautiful anemone. All right, and just a quick little reminder that she gives you this really nice kind of close-up detailed picture of your block, but the one that you're stitching and tracing is this one here. She also talks about all of the stitches that she uses, and she shows you and tells you her thread colors. But frankly, if you don't want to deal with all of that, and if you just want to make it one color, it is beautiful with just one color. Really, the whole quilt is just a really fun way to learn lots and lots and lots of different hand embroidery techniques. And the one today is kind of fun because really all it is a fly stitch and French knots. So it's really cool. So let's start with that and let's go over to the hoop. All right, so I drew my 3 lines, and just a reminder, I like to use a friction marker because then after I'm done with my lines, I can just iron them away. So I went ahead and drew 3 lines, and again, this is probably a little bit wider than what you're going to do for your border piece, but it's because you're going to do a fly stitch on one side, flip and do the fly stitch on the other side, fly stitch on one side, fly stitch on the other side, and then you'll have your French knots in there. Now, you might decide to go ahead and do it together. Do your fly stitches and French knots at the same time. But for me, I think that I would go ahead and do the fly stitches I keep saying fly stitches, but I think I actually mean feather stitches. And then do the French knots, because then if I decide that I want to do a different color, I could go ahead and do that. So on most feather stitches, what you would do is you would do one and then you would do it on the other side, and then you'd come back one and then you'd do the other side. But of course, this one, you're just going on one side. And once I've done 3 on this side, so those were all stabbing. Now let's see if I can do a swooping. A swooping, you can see I'm not a swooper. Okay. Oh, I already forgot I was swooping. Sorry. Anyway, and then 3 on one side, 3 on the other, 3 on one side, 3 on the other, and then, oh, let's see if I can swoop again. I make swooping look really difficult, but you either find one or the other comfortable. You can tell which one I think is comfortable. Okay. Then I would, for me personally, is I would keep going. I would do 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, and then I would go ahead and come back. Let me just, because then again, if I wanted to go ahead and change color, I could go ahead and do that, because then right across from your fly stitch here is where you're going to go ahead and do your French knot. And your French knot, we've done those many times. You're just going to do 3 or 4, kind of, you know, whatever you would like, depending upon the thread that you're using. Remember to keep your thread tight. And there's your French knot. And then the next one would be right across from that one. And again, this is much larger than shown on the quilt, just so that you can see it a little bit better. I'm sort of nervous that my hands are in the way here. 1, 2, 3. I think I did 4 before. All right, and then that's it. We'll just keep going. So that's what will happen is it's 3 fly stitches, 3 French knots, 3 fly stitches, 3 French feather. Gosh darn it. They're feather stitches. But anyway, and then you'll just keep going down. My suggestion, I think that these are 1/4 inch apart. I would put them closer together, and she gives you the measurements in the pattern. Okay, so this is the piece block that we're doing, and I just want to tell you that I am doing it ever so slightly different, and I just want to tell you what I think. So first of all, she does tell you on the pattern exactly what to cut, and she has you mix up these colors, and you can see on the piece quilt that is what Jen did, and that's all good. I am tending to do a little bit more lower volume, and so my colors are going to be a little bit different. Where all of this pink is all going to be just this soft gray, and then I'm going to have the dark blue here where the brown is, and then this piece is going to be this gray piece. So mine is just a little bit different, and rather than cut extra half square triangles and deal with that, I'm just going to end up with an extra half square triangle that I'm just going to put in my mixed piece box that I will find some use for later. The other quick thing before I put this away that I want to mention is she tells you that this piece here, she tells you to cut a rectangle that's 2.5 by 12.5 inches. And that's just a little typo, because of course for this block, you don't need a 2.5 by 12.5. You need a 2.5 by 2.5 inch square. That's your center square. And then you have these 2.5 inch squares. You're going to sew that together and then sew on this 6.5 by 2.5, and you'll end up with this little 6.5 by 6.5 inch block, and put that one aside. Super, super simple. I think this is the 3rd time that we've made this particular block in this grouping. So that's the top piece. In whatever colors you decide to use, I am trying to use leftovers, and so that's what I'm doing. Then, so I want to talk to you then about this piece. So she has you cut a 6 7/8 inch square that you're going to cut in half. and then you're going to make 1, 2, 3 half square triangles. And so what I'm going to do is I have these 2 squares. I have these 2 squares that I've already drawn the lines on. And so I'm just going to put this like this. And we've done this multiple times. I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch on both sides, cut that apart, press it, square it up a little bit, and I will have 1, 2, 3, which is what I need. And then I will have this really weird little lone leftover that will be something else later. Then I have these pieces, and these pieces I cut 2. And I think what she had you do was cut 1 piece here and 1 piece here so that you could sew your triangles. But in my mind, this seemed to work a little bit better for me. So I have my 2 squares, and I'm going to cut both of these in half, which is going to give me 4 triangles, but I only need 1, 2, 3. Now, here's the thing that I think is super important is that this is block number 11. And so it's time to kind of talk about bias if that's not something that you've done much of. And bias is, of course, just that stretchy, unruly part of the fabric that is always on the diagonal. Because what happens with our threads is we have warp threads and we have weft threads because all of our fabric is, woven like this. So threads that go this way, threads that go this way. So wherever we cut, we might have a little thread that's going to hang off, but nothing weird is going to happen. But when we cut it this way, we have all of these little short pieces, and so things can happen. One thing that can happen is you can end up with a lot of stretch that you don't want. And the other thing is something that's called bloom, where if you're handling that piece a lot, it'll just kind of relax a little bit. And that triangle will become, stretchy on one side. So there is a simple solution to that. And the solution is Best Press, or there are some other brands out there, whatever you prefer to use. And you might just like just regular, basic, good old starch. The thing that I would say about that is that if you're using starch, you'll end up with a buildup on your sole plate, and it'll kind of start to cook just a little bit. So just a little mention, if you're not using Best Press, if you are using starch, keep some of that iron clean along, just to go ahead and clean that up just a little bit. Best Press is nice because it doesn't create that, and it doesn't create that white residue. But what you do with Best Press, now what I tend to do is I tend to put it in a mister. I just like this because it doesn't spurt out and it creates this even amount. And I want you to see the difference. So I wish you could tell, but can you tell how stiff this is? That it's almost like paper. Can you tell that? And look at it compared to this.
You can just tell just by holding it.
Can you see? Yeah. Oh, oh. So this is what the difference is. What I did is I came over and I spray so that I basically have it saturated. See how wet that is? And then once I have it that wet, I am just going to cook it. I'm just going to make a little starch slurry on my fabric, and I'm going to heat it until it's dry. And so that's what you do. This is just, this isn't starch. This is some sort of a magical concoction, but it's the same idea. And what will happen is this fabric will stay stiff while I'm sewing it, but then after I'm done, all of it washes out. It doesn't leave any kind of residual. There isn't any odor. There isn't anything. But what is really nice is that not a single one of my, so see the difference? Not a single one of my weird little bias threads are going to do anything naughty. They are going to stay right where they need to stay while I sew everything, because otherwise I would have blooming essentially on this edge, this edge, this edge, and this edge. And so that's why that's critical. So I have starched or best pressed these 2 pieces and this piece. See the difference there? So then what I'm going to do is just take this one, and this is what she tells you to do. I'm just going to cut this in half on the diagonal. And again, I don't have any risk really of that weird blooming or stretching going on because it's just as stiff and secure here as it is everywhere else. I'm only going to use half of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to really fast go ahead and make my half square triangles, cut these in half, and we'll be right back. All right, so here we are. So I have cut all these two in half. This gives me an extra weird little triangle. And then here are my 4 half square triangles. And they're going to be like this. And that gives me an extra half square triangle. For me, having these little extras is a little bit easier than dealing with all of the triangles. I just found this to be easier. So then all I'm going to do is when you sew these together, you will have this funny little tail at the end. When you do your half square triangle, I mean your 1/4 inch seam allowance and press it, you won't have that. You'll have just a little tail to cut off. Same thing here. You'll do your 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then you'll do the same thing here. 1/4 inch seam allowance. You're going to end up right there. You'll cut that off, and then you'll line those up, and you'll end up, by the time you sew this seam, you'll have a perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance there. Same thing then is going to happen here. Hug the far edge here. We're going to sew that right there with your 1/4 inch seam allowance. Press that open. And then after you've done that, aside from just a couple of funny little dog ears that you trim off, everything is going to line up perfect. Okay, so we sewed this one. You can see we've got our 1/4 inch seam allowance already available on those 2 sides. We've done this one. And see, that's that funny little dog ear. You don't want to trim all of that off yet. All you want to do is just nip off that little dog ear. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and sew this piece, lining it up at the bottom down here. Sew that up. I'll have another little dog ear. And then I'm going to sew this one on the same way, starting right here, sew across here. Okay, so they look like this. I went ahead and pressed that one open, and I'll press this one open. And now there's those little dog ears again. So I'm going to go ahead and trim this one off. And don't go crazy with a ruler, because I really do need that full 1/4 inch there. And pretty soon I'm going to end up with a 1/4 inch seam allowance right there, because my last piece, I'm going to line up this right here. And I'm going to sew this seam. Okay, so we've sewn that last seam. So now all we have to do is just give this a good press. Press this open. I have one last little dog ear to trim off. And then again, so see, I've got that 1/4 inch right there. 1/4 inch right there, so that when we sew this on, it's going to fit on there perfectly. And I still have my 1/4 inch all the way around, so that my block ends up, when it's sewn within everything, I have my perfect little points that's there. So anyway, that's how we do it. And you can still see that there isn't any blooming or stretching with these pieces that we starched. Okay, that was block number 11 of our 12-month block of the month. We are nearing the end. So in 2 weeks, we will have the final block and finishing. So our final block is going to be this cute little guy here, and this block, which is fairly similar to what we did back in block number 4, but that's pretty good. And then also, we're going to very briefly talk about our finishing. The finishing is super simple. There's some large chunky pieces. She tells you the size to cut, and then there's a little bit of stitching that we'll do to make it kind of cute, but nothing that you haven't already learned. We'll just talk about how to get this whole thing finished up so you can enjoy your Jaye's Bouquet quilt. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you for watching our video. We invite you to leave a comment, hit the like button, or better yet, subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode. You can also visit our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or Pinterest pages, or find all of those things and our online store at fabricpatch.net.